is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer. Jonas, we are here to discuss some of the Ravens' recent draftees. We're going to be joined by James Foster of the 33rd team to break down especially the top guy that the Ravens brought in the 2025 NFL draft, Malaki Starks. We also have an update on the Ravens' offensive line. One player in and one player potentially not ready for training camp. But first, I want to give a shout out to our columnist, Kyle Goon, writing an outstanding story on the BaltimoreBanner.com where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months about the release of Justin Tucker and the Ravens calling it a football decision. And Jonas, the one thing that it's a lesson I've learned a million times over, but I especially learned it after posting a graphic with this column. Nobody ever reads the story before they offer their opinion on it. Nobody ever takes in the facts before they just decide to spew out their take. And let me tell you, it's the worst.
And what's even better is that when you write a story that's long, the chances of people reading past the 1,000 word mark go down like 50% with every 500 words. So you could work really, really hard on a story, and there's a chance that no one will read it. And there's also probably an even more likely chance that the people who do read it won't read all of it. So yeah, it really makes you contemplate your existence on this burning, dying planet, right?
Yeah, what are we doing here anyway? Jonas, our word of the day is Noteboom. And when you Google Noteboom, the only thing that comes up is information about the player that the Ravens signed about a week ago. And that's Joe Noteboom, a versatile veteran offensive lineman coming over from the LA Rams. But I wanted to know exactly how common the name Noteboom is and where it comes from because it's fascinating. And according to Wikipedia, it's a Dutch surname originally meaning nut tree. So I guess our word of the day could have been nut tree if we had so chosen it. But is that where your internet research led you as well, Jonas, or am I slightly off here?
I'm just blessed by the depth of name quality that we've gotten in this offseason. We've gotten a Malachi, we've got a Teddy with two E's, we've got a
and
Bilal,
a Y. Yeah,
we've got a Lejante, we've got an Aeneas, whose parents did not name him explicitly after the Greco-Roman mythological figure, but in fact after Aeneas Williams. And then we've got a longer beam. I mean, what else could a football fan want on the team that they cover?
maybe a Shaffer and Mancano as well, but that'll have to wait for another day. Let's talk about Joe Noteboom. Joe Noteboom, 29 years old, originally a third-round pick in 2018 by the Rams, won that Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford a few years after he was drafted. He's a big dude, 6'5", 300 pounds. Was limited to just 4 games in 2024 because of an ankle injury. And his pass blocking numbers have not been stellar the last few years. According to Pro Football Focus, he allowed 2 sacks and 15 pressures last year. But Jonas, this is a guy who struggled with injuries. Certainly the Ravens like the fact that he can play multiple positions along that offensive line. And they came out of the draft with a couple offensive linemen, but it's one of those positions that it doesn't hurt to add some depth. And so they pick up a veteran guy that they feel like can step in at a couple different spots.
Yeah, you just got to have faith that the Ravens did their homework on his medicals because they are worrisome. Pectoral strain in 2021, knee sprain in 2022, Achilles tendon rupture 2022, foot sprain in 2023. And then last year, obviously, he had that ankle ligament tear, which is probably the most serious of those, along with the Achilles tendon. So if they can work him back to a workable version of himself, or at least the prior version of himself when he was a much more reliable figure for that Ravens offensive line, then they've got themselves a viable swing tackle. But if Roddy Stanley gets hurt or if Roger Rosen gets hurt and Noteboom is just an even more diminished version of the guy that he was last year or the year before, then I don't know. I kind of feel like you're back to square one, and maybe you just be better off with throwing Emory Jones out there, or maybe Carson Vincent has developed enough that you want to kind of roll the dice on him. So it really just comes down to, can this Ravens medical staff, can the strength and conditioning staff put him in a place and get his body back to a point where he's athletically competent and just not overwhelmed in maybe some of the ways that he was last year. And, the Ravens had great health out wide last year. But you figure that at some point, either Ronnie or Roger will get nicked up. And at that point, you really have to have faith that Joe Noteboom could step in and be able to kind of punch above his weight for a little bit if it's a matchup with, a Watt or a Garrett or whoever else is on the other side of that offensive line.
And you mentioned Emory Jones Jr., who was one of the 3 offensive linemen the Ravens drafted out of their 11 draft picks, in addition to Carson Vincent and Garrett Dellinger. But Emory Jones Jr., according to John Harbaugh, when he met with the media for the start of rookie minicamp, is dealing with a labrum injury in his shoulder that he suffered during the pre-draft process. So that is a day 2 pick, a 3rd round pick that the Ravens have invested a big pick in. They were hoping could either be a swing tackle or could be used at guard. That John Harbaugh kept the door open to that when he was drafted, but it sounds like he could miss some time and he might not be ready for training camp.
Yeah, you just really hope that this is not a different version of the Adisa Isaac experience last year. Came in with a lot of hype, a lot of optimism about what that athletic package could mean for the Ravens pass rush if they could get their hands on him, but they never really could get their hands on him. I think my
Same
understanding is
round
that
pick as Emory Jones too.
I know exactly. He I think had some issues with Adisa Isaac had some issues with his pre-draft combine training, and it led to a hamstring strain, which led to another hamstring strain, and it was just one thing after another. And the player that the Ravens threw out there as a rookie just was not all that impressive, and couldn't really win as a pass rusher, and was just okay as a run defender. And you would obviously like Emory Jones, if he is indeed transitioning from tackle to guard, to get as many reps as possible to be a viable contender, to maybe push Andrew Voorhees or big Daniel Lilly for that job. It's going to be really, really tough, I think, if he comes in and has basically only a month or so to win that job in training camp, if that is indeed as long as he's held out for. So, we all saw just how much Big Sala was able to use his impressive OTAs to basically come into training camp in 2023 with that lead at left guard. It obviously didn't hold, and nothing really came of his time in Baltimore at all. But you got a sense for just what John Harbaugh thought was possible. And if Emory Jones can't get onto the field until late July, then it'll probably be out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, well, our Who's Got It Better Than award, Jonas, before I forget to hand it out, does go to Joe Noteboom for being added to the Ravens roster. So we have checked both boxes. We got our word of the day, and we got our Who's Got It Better Than. And anytime that we can hit 2 birds with 1 stone by using it both on one player, that's ideal. Well, you just mentioned Emory Jones. We talked a little bit about the Ravens' 3rd round pick, but let's get James Foster's thoughts on the Ravens draft class. And now we're joined on the Banner Ravens podcast by NFL draft analyst James Foster. His work has appeared in the 33rd team, and he's done some great stuff in terms of scouting this Ravens draft class in particular. James, let's start at the top with Malaki Starks, the Ravens' 1st round pick. You wrote an awesome breakdown of his career at Georgia in a piece that was posted a couple months ago, and it was just a fascinating look at where he's come as a prospect, going from a guy that was viewed as a blue chip guy to maybe, certainly a very talented player, but with less ball production. And he was been moved around a lot in that Georgia defense. When you look at his fit on the Ravens, where you look at his journey as a prospect, what were some of your biggest takeaways about Malaki Starks?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's a really interesting evaluation, because if you go into his 2024 tape expecting to watch safety tape, like, you're not really getting that very much. It's a lot of just, he was playing most of his passing down snaps in the nickel for Georgia's defense. So it's a lot of just like press man on receivers is what you're seeing from Malaki Starks, and gave up more explosive plays this year, didn't have as much ball production. And I think a lot of that can be explained by the role, just because when you're in man coverage, it's not really a conducive situation to getting interceptions and everything. But, even with what he showed kind of playing out of position, I know that there were multiple teams this year that had him graded as an outside corner. Like, he showed real versatility to be able to play man to man. Obviously has that single high range. He's a physical tackler, good run defender. Somebody that has played at the highest level against great competition. There's just kind of some inconsistencies over the years on his tape that need to get ironed out. But I mean, he's going to a great situation. Obviously, him pairing up with Kyle Hamilton, I think, is perfect. And even if he's not the blue chip like top 5 player that a lot of people kind of thought he was, prospects, if somebody's a 5-star and they've kind of played earlier in their career, they just kind of get like shoved into the top 10 of mock drafts before everybody really gets into the tape. So even if he's not quite that caliber of player, still a first round pick, really good value at 27. So love that pick. And, on the field, at least love the Ravens' second pick as well.
James, going back to Malachi, I think the first person that everyone brings up after talking about that selection is Kyle Hamilton, as you said. Do you think his introduction to that system is more important for Kyle going back to where he has been his most disruptive, or do you think it's most important for Malachi in terms of putting him in a situation where maybe he can play center field a little bit more, play split field looks, doesn't really have to be, maybe as athletically exposed as he was at times for Georgia last year? How do you think that kind of handoff works in the big picture?
Yeah, I think if anything, like it works in Kyle Hamilton's favor, because I think Malaki Starks is more versatile. It's weird because like you would say, obviously Kyle Hamilton is kind of one of the Swiss Army knives of the NFL, but like there are certain safety positions that he can't really play. With Malaki Starks, I really think that he can play all over. And I view Malaki Starks as a good athlete. I think really the one area where he got exposed a little bit last year is having to mirror like slot receivers in man-to-man, like keep up with a dig route or a quick slant. When it comes to just range and like running in a straight line, I think he is really straight line fast. Didn't test that well, but the next gen stats tracking data from him at the combine, like he was one of the most athletic players there. So I think that kind of translates more to on-field speed. But Starks is somebody that I think really just fits in with wanting to run a lot of coverage rotations, because he's somebody that you can plug into really any position on the back seven in a pinch when you need to.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your article as well about that deep safety role kind of being an issue. And I know a lot of fans were looking at, and we talked about Nick Eamon-Warry as a intriguing prospect coming into this draft as somebody who is hyper athletic. Not to say that Malaki Starks isn't very athletic, but Nick Eamon-Warry obviously jumped off the page with his athleticism. But in terms of the more prepared player for the NFL, do you feel like Malaki Starks checks that box as well? And maybe his versatility helps with that?
Yeah, I think that so I always felt like Nick Eamon-Warry was a little bit underrated in terms of his pro readiness, but I would definitely say that Malaki Starks is more ready to contribute year one. I think Nick Eamon-Warry kind of falls into that Kyle Hamilton tier of versatile prospects, but still, like as far as change of direction and like deep coverage, maybe not as good as some other players. But I think that for the Ravens situation specifically, like adding Nick Eamon-Warry would have been a little bit redundant with what they already have. Starks, the skill sets really like pair together perfectly.
One guy that they didn't really have anyone quite like is Mike Green. Obviously, I don't think anyone expected him to fall to pick 59 in the second round like he did. James, on your YouTube channel, which I encourage everyone to check out, James_Foster_film, you had him as your second rated edge rusher, although he was, I believe, kind of closely clustered with some of those other second-tier guys behind Abdul Carter. What do you think he could be for this Ravens defense in year one, coming from Marshall, but obviously having wowed everyone with his production against Power 4 competition, and then obviously doing what he did at Senior Bowl?
I think Mike Green was the second best pass rusher in this class. Really checks every box just in terms of speed, explosiveness, bend. Very skilled with his hands. Has a power profile. Like you want to see the bull rush get a little bit more consistent, but his violence into contact, like he can create some knockback and push the pocket. and just a relentless motor. I think that's one of the things that stands out about Mike Green is, never stops pursuing, but also extremely natural when it comes to like transitioning to counters throughout the rep when his first move gets tied up. And so him getting to the quarterback is kind of just an inevitable fact, and it just depends on how long the quarterback holds on to the ball. Obviously, it has the level of competition concerns, but like you said, played pretty well against Ohio State. Wish he would have been matched up with Josh Simmons a couple times, or a couple more times, so we could have seen some of those reps. But beat up on Josh Fryer, their right tackle, and played pretty well against Virginia Tech as well, the other Power 4 team that they played. And then also played well at the Senior Bowl. So I thought his tape was extremely clean. He gets criticized for run defense, and like I don't think he sets the strongest edge, but he is incredibly physical when it comes to playing blocks, making plays in the backfield. And I think there's other edge rushers of similar size that get way less scrutiny for their run defense than Mike Green does, which makes sense because wasn't playing great competition, but still big fan of what he can give you in both phases.
Yeah, I mean, no questions about his on-field impact. Obviously, the concerns have to do with the off-field stuff. We've reported about just why he fell, and talking to his coaches. They were obviously big fans of his. But as Ian Rappaport reported on draft night, there were several teams who did not feel comfortable having him on their board. One of the great nuggets from your YouTube breakdown, James, was you have connections in the scouting community, and there were teams that were not at all convinced by what he told them about the various sexual assault allegations. I guess, what do you feel comfortable sharing about maybe what he did to kind of hurt himself during that pre-draft process?
So what I heard from a team was that he said it doesn't matter if I did, when asked about the sexual assault claims, and that led them to taking him off of their board. So, I only have like firsthand info from one team, but yeah, that's what I heard.
James, of course, is referring to the 2 sexual assault allegations that Mike Green has faced, one from high school, one from college, both of which he has denied. When you look at the rest of the Ravens picks, they made 11 picks. Amazingly, they did not trade out any of their picks. They stayed and picked at most of these spots and traded back a couple times. But are there guys out there? Maybe Teddy Buchanan is a guy who stuck out as a early day 3 pick. Some of the offensive linemen. What was your take overall on some of the individual guys that the Ravens got later in the draft?
Yeah, so I really like the secondary additions they made. You mentioned Teddy Buchanan. He was one of my guys in this class, especially in coverage. I wasn't as big of a fan of the day 3 offensive lineman that they added, but their day 3 offensive lineman. I guess like the first guy I would start off with is Teddy Buchanan, who I think plays zone coverage at an NFL level. When you watch all these college linebackers, they're in such specialized schemes. Like a lot of them aren't really taking deep zone drops. When they have, like when PFF credits them with a coverage snap, they might kind of just be hovering around the line of scrimmage as like a QB spy or something. With Teddy Buchanan, like he really understands how much depth he needs to get. He can have his eyes on the quarterback and anticipate routes that are developing behind him in zone coverage, knows when he needs to, he understands when a dig is breaking behind him and he needs to slide over to get in front of the passing lane. It was a little bit disappointing because he didn't have a lot of production this year at California. He transferred from UC Davis. And if you go watch his interception and pass breakup reel from UC Davis, it's like some of the most incredible plays on the ball that you'll see from a linebacker. Unfortunately, didn't repeat that production, but the down-to-down coverage tape I thought was just as impressive. His big issue is that he just can't really play through blocks, so he gets pancaked a lot. Makes a lot of plays in the run game, but I would probably project him as more of like a sub package specialist. But for what he does, I think that was a really solid pick. And then Bilal Cohn, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it actually, and Robert
Kone,
Longerbeam. were two defensive backs that I really liked. Longerbeam is undersized but incredibly explosive. He's got that closing burst. Like a lot of his pass breakups this year, it's from off coverage or something. The receiver gets his hands on it initially, but he's able to come in at the last second and rake the ball out. And Cone is just like really well balanced, good size and length. He can run, instincts and zone coverage. I didn't think he was, very explosive playing from depth and closing space, but a really smart, well-rounded player, and put out his best tape against the best competition that they faced. Ohio State and Wisconsin, I believe, were on their schedule over the last 2 seasons. And like those were two of his better games. So it doesn't surprise me that he went, mid to early day 3.
James, the one of those day 3 dart throws at offensive line, Carson Vincent, obviously going to have to do an even more dramatic readjustment in terms of play quality than Mike Green going from the HBCU level to the NFL. I only got a chance to watch the All-22 for one of those games that he played in, and it was against Auburn, and it was not pretty for Alabama A&T or for Carson. Obviously, the Ravens feel like there are enough traits there that maybe he can develop into a guy who can be a contributor by year 2, year 3. He obviously had a okay week at Senior Bowl, all things considered, better slate of practices than the game. What were your takeaways from him? And I guess what does he need to develop into a guy who could possibly be a contributor at the NFL level?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that you're drafting for the traits, prototypical frame, tested pretty well. It's kind of hard because he's got, I think over 3,400 career snaps, if I'm not mistaken, a ton of experience, and like his tape against FCS competition was solid, but not particularly dominant. The Auburn game was pretty rough, but I felt like he was getting beat around the corner by Jackson State and some of the FCS teams that he played. He's got good play strength, but he lets people into his frame too often, and so he'll get walked back by power. I like his motor in the run game. There's a lot of plays where he is still like driving somebody off of the screen by the time the film cuts off. So I love his kind of physical edge that he plays with, and you've got the outline of like an NFL tackle, but he's really got to fill it in with some technical advancement. It was earlier than I had him, but like I'm not going to be too critical of a team taking a traitsy offensive lineman on day 3.
James, when we take a step back, you evaluate obviously all of these guys, and a couple intriguing prospects going to the Chiefs, a couple intriguing prospects going to the Bills, and on the Ravens' heels, obviously within their own division. The Bengals got better. Browns had a lot of picks. They got better. When you look at the kind of axis of power in the AFC, the Ravens will be chasing the Bills and Chiefs until they're not. And then they have these teams right on their heels. How do you think maybe draft weekend shifted the balance of power in the AFC, if at all?
So I think probably the one move that I would say would shift the balance of power is like if Josh Simmons works out for Kansas City, that's a real bummer for all the other AFC contenders, because the Chiefs having that gaping hole at left tackle is kind of like, one of the things that's keeping them down on earth with everyone else. And so, yeah, if you get Patrick Mahomes, really clean pass protection, and then they continue to build up that receiving core, I think the Chiefs draft is the one that would really concern me. I'm a Titans fan, so I don't have to worry about the AFC contenders. We're competing with Jacksonville and Las Vegas to not be the worst team in the AFC. But for those of you that have successful teams that you follow, I would be a little bit worried about the Chiefs draft. I thought the Bills were solid. I'm not a big Landon Jackson guy, and I think Maxwell Hairston is good for their scheme, but pretty inconsistent on tape, I thought. I would rate the Bills and Ravens in kind of a similar tier as far as their draft. Like some things that they did, but some picks that I wasn't huge on.
And what I love about this draft too in the Ravens' own division is one team that needed a quarterback got basically no quarterbacks except Will Howard, and the other team got way too many quarterbacks.
Yeah.
So just a fascinating weekend all around. James, thanks so much for joining us. Where can everybody find your work and your YouTube channel where you have your breakdowns?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at NoFlagsFilm. See all my writing and film cut-ups on there. And then on YouTube, James Foster, if you just type in, I'm competing with a swim channel. I just started my channel. So those are the two things that pop up when you type in James Foster. But if you type in James Foster NFL, it'll be up there.
Thanks so much for your thoughts. And for Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. We will be back at some point probably next week to break down the schedule release for the Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.